And then a week or two later, I get another email from SANS, and this time they're asking for it's a call for proposals. And they said that if your proposal for a talk gets accepted, they would waive the registration fee. So Ron and I, we looked at each other and we said, well, we don't know shit about computer security, but golly, And then Ron said, well, I guess we could talk about what happened to us.
All right, welcome back to another episode of the Cybersecurity Mentors Podcast. And on today's episode, we have Randy Marchany, a longtime security practitioner and CISO for Virginia Tech University. And Randy and I have connected different ways over the years and just stayed in touch with questions that I would have. It's like, hey, Randy, what about this? What about that? Because he's usually been there and done that. Which is great. And Randy, you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. Thanks for having me. My name is Randy Marchany. I'm the CISO here at Virginia Tech in Blacksburg, Virginia. I've been the CISO for 15 years now. And this summer, in July, I'll be retiring from this role as the CISO. I'm also the director of the Virginia Tech IT Security Lab, which is affiliated with the security office here at Virginia Tech. So I keep my hand in the research side of the house with graduate students and undergraduate students, creating something like what we call a teaching hospital. I've been in the IT world here at Virginia Tech. This is my 50th year of long history of IT here at the university. Been doing cybersecurity stuff for about 35 of those 50 years. I'm found the SANS Institute in its infancy. I'm in SANS instructor number 2. And currently now, I guess I'm the longest running SANS instructor. Hal Pomerantz was instructor number 1, but he retired from SANS a couple of years ago. So, if you can't beat him on merit, you just beat him on longevity.
Yeah.
But it's been a lot of fun here, and as you'll see, I had a hand in a lot of things. Virginia Tech and myself, we're charter members of the Center for Internet Security, and there were a number of other projects. The U.S. Cyber Challenge, which was founded by Alan Powler from SANS to basically set up what I call a sports tournament type format where we ask people to participate in the CTF, and the top scorers of those CTFs get invited to a week-long camp that we set up with instructors all over the place. Other things, in Virginia, we have a consortium of the public universities, the 15 of us, plus the Virginia Community College System, and I'm one of the founders of that. And then from the educational side of the house, I was part of the team that created the Virginia Cyber Range, and its twin, the U.S. Cyber Range, and that's a platform that allows K through 12 community college and higher eds in Virginia to actually have hands-on cybersecurity classes, and you don't get screamed at by your local IT people for having hackers on your network. And then on the side notes, I was telling you, John, that I was a grad assistant volleyball coach. I used to play a lot of club volleyball in my younger years. And then I'm a musician. I played in a band for 38 years, and we put out a bunch of albums, won a bunch of awards, and still play music here in this area. Blacksburg is pretty rich in traditional music events around here, so it's been a lot of fun.
Yeah. Man, there's a lot there, which is great. I think the first note I wrote down was the lab, the teaching hospital piece of that. Could you talk about that a little bit? I really like that idea, and we do something not like a teaching hospital, but with our SOC, right, with the students. But could you talk about how that Virginia teaching lab is set up?
Sure. So In 2002, 2003, my CIO came over and asked if we could build a lab where we could teach students hands-on, give them some hands-on experience in cybersecurity. And so my wife is a physician, and so I know when she went through the residency and that type of stuff, that concept of a teaching hospital is kind of what kind of popped in my head when he started talking about it. And so in that era, we started recruiting undergrad students to come in and do an independent study. So the hook was to give them some course credit, and that way we could justify them working for us, because we didn't have a budget at that time for wage and things like that. And so over the years, as the security office, I was able to add more full-time staff. We were able to do the same thing with students. We were very fortunate. The graduate school here at the university allots a certain number of graduate research assistants, GRA slots, to various departments. And when I was looking for grad students, and it's like, well, how am I going to fund them? It turned out that we had like these 4 GRA slots that were unused, that nobody in our division had claimed them. So I said, well, I'll take them, and then that really it was what got us on the board, so to speak, on the graduate side of the house. We were very lucky also that the Army has a program called Advanced Civil School, where officers they apply to the Army to be in the program, and if they get accepted, then basically the Army says, apply wherever you want to apply to, and if you get accepted, that becomes your next post. And so, if you're working on a master's degree, you'll be posted at that university for 2 years. And if you're working on a PhD, you'll be posted there for 3 years. Well, a lot of other schools didn't want to do the PhD thing because, we have to have PhD people for 5 years or more, right? And Dr. Joe Trott, who was in the computer engineering department, he was my advisor when I was in grad school. He and I went to the grad school and we said, can people do, is it okay in the grad school if somebody does a PhD in 3 years? And they kind of laughed at us, like, they said, well, we've had, 1 or 2 people, former president of the university who was, at the genius level, he did his PhD in 2 years, And they said, as long as he meets the requirements, which was, published papers and the coursework, he said, as long as they meet the requirements, we don't care. And so with that, we were able to get a number of Army officers come through the lab. So history-wise, again, both the Army guys and again, this is in the mid-2000s, the 2000 to 2017, 18 range. So some of the early Army officers, they transitioned to Cyber Command as it was just starting up then. One of my favorite little stories about that is we had probably graduated 8 or 9 Army officers in the PhD program. And after they finished at Virginia Tech, they went to be instructors at West Point. And so the joke that I used to say was, 3/4 of their electrical and computer engineering department came from our lab. We were able to graduate, 14 PhD students, 15 master's students, and we got 3 cybersecurity patents out of the work that the students did. And in addition, so now some of those guys, they're CISOs. One of them's a CISO for a major credit card company, international and sporting goods companies and that type of stuff. So they've all farmed out. And, we've tried to get more students to come in. Budget and COVID put a real hit on us, and it's taken us a couple of years to recover from that. It's kind of like once you get that pipeline going, and it's just to get that pipeline going again.
Yeah.
But the whole idea was to have them do kind of a residency, if you will. We tried to get students when they were juniors and seniors. In that era of freshmen and sophomores, well, no, you have to learn how to walk before you can run. I mean, but after their sophomore year, we would try to get them some hands-on. Nowadays, my office is organized. I have 4 teams of people. We've got 13 people in the security office here now. I have a red team that does pen testing for university applications and websites. So we basically pen test ourselves internally. And they also do security architecture consulting there. So that's the red team. The blue team is the traditional team. They look at our sensors, and they're the core of the incident response team there. I have a green team which does risk assessments and risk management stuff and third-party risk management, if you will. They work closely with the university procurement. So you want to buy some software, you go through the university procurement process, but one of the checklist items is it has to be reviewed by the green team. And they will query the vendor with the HECVAT, that we use, and those type of vendor questionnaires, depending on the sensitivity of the data that's going to be handled by the vendor, that type of stuff. So, and they are doing our risk management stuff. We're using the Salty Clouds Isora risk GRC platform. And so they're coordinating and doing all that type of stuff there. So that's the green team. And then I have a 1-person purple team that interfaces with our internal SOC. And we also have an external SOC. We're using Indiana University's OmniSOC. So he's the liaison person between the external SOC and that. So the students, what we're trying to do is, if we get them in the junior years, we asked them, what do you want to be? Well, everybody wants to be a hacker. Well, okay, got it. But like Ed said, when he was talking to you, is, for us to be good defenders, we have to know how to attack. And so, we say, okay, here, if you're interested, here's, work on with the red team on some stuff. And then we're going to transition you to the blue team. Well, now that you know how to break into something, or, you can try, how do you defend against that? How do you detect it? That type of things. And then the business information technology people in the College of Business, they have done a tremendous job with their business students that are interested in IT. And they're actually teaching classes on teaching their business students that are interested in auditing and that type of stuff, IT auditing. They're teaching them how to use basic tools like Nmap and things like that. So we have a couple of them that come over to work with us. So, we're trying to rebuild the budgets after COVID and get them on as wage. But, for instance, I've got two undergrads that they're working with our Splunk team and with the green team, and they're building dashboards for us. How many high-risk systems that the green team has categorized, how many of them are actually sending logs to our central log system. So it's not where it was number wise before COVID, but it's getting there. And yeah. To me, that's something that, I think is going to help them out a lot.
Absolutely. Yeah. And we see it. We started the student SOC in 2016. And it was just a game changer for us and for me, being able to immediately see how much of an impact they could make and help protect and detect. And then last year we started with our red team. We started the red team, and then we started it with the idea of a similar bringing in the students as well, and just a force multiplier. That's really the easiest way to describe it. Is if you could have your team, but then now imagine you could multiply that out to resources that you couldn't afford to bring in full time. And it's a win. It's a win-win, right? They get that real experience that's tough to get until you get out a lot of times. So they get it in college, and then they go back to class, but then they come back, and then they go on summer internships with different companies, and they bring that skill set back. So each year you keep them, the better they are. And then the ultimate goal is, if we have a vacancy, is to try to keep them here.
Yep.
Which has worked out for us several times. It doesn't always work out, but it does work out occasionally, because then you've got a chance to see how they do and how they operate, and you get to know them. They get to know you. You know their strengths and weaknesses, and then they can hit the ground running immediately. Some of those students have left, and then they came back, which is great. If they come back, not everybody comes back, but if I can trick them to come back, then keep them here as long as I can. That's just win-win for us too. So it's really been beneficial.
You guys have the thing with faculty and staff can take a class under like a tuition waiver for free,
yes.
if you will.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
I use that a lot with as a hook, because as you and I know, we can't afford to match a lot of what industry can pay these guys, but I said, hey, if you're interested in getting a master's degree, you can do this and not get a student loan.
Yeah.
You have to take the classes part-time. So, 3 years instead of 2 years. But hey, if I keep it for 3 years, that works for me.
Yeah. We've had several go through our MBA program and do that exact same thing. So,
use that as a hook.
Yeah.
And the other nice thing is sometimes they, I get, in a way, I guess you and I, because we've been doing this for so long, we sort of get jaded sometimes in our approach, and then they come in and ask a completely, to us, a left field question. And then we go, God, why didn't we think of that?
Exactly. Yeah. I think it's unique having young minds with a different perspective that haven't been in this so long, and they're just able to they throw those left field balls at you, and you're like, man, that's a good idea. Let's look at that. So being open to that.
I would always get the question, say, well, will this work? And I go, I don't know, let's try it. That's what research is, right? We got a question, let's see if it doesn't work. Well, we know that approach doesn't work, but it's like, I have a little, thing here that just says, dare to suck. A lot of times people are just afraid to hit that key, and I said, as a sysadmin, because I started off as an IBM systems programmer. Then I went to Intel 8080s, nowadays what we call Internet of Things. We were doing data acquisition stuff. And then from that, I transitioned to VAX systems. I was a VAX system, manager for a while, and then transitioned to Unix and did that. But I said, in all of those scenarios, we blew up systems, and we had to recover, and so it's like, if you have a good back out plan, any good sysadmin knows you don't do anything unless you have a good back out plan. And that's one of the things I try to, let them know. I said, look, failure, nobody wants to see that. But if you can recover from the failure, that's a plus. And that's something that later on, because we all know systems are going to fail sooner or later. But, knowing that you have the confidence that you can rebuild a system that you burned down to the ground, is that's just a confidence builder, and you don't panic as much as you would if you had never done it before.
Yeah. Well, let's go back. You talked about your history with the system side of things, and then I was reading what you had on your site about the first hack that you experienced. I think it was like 1991. So you want to talk
Yep.
about that?
Yeah, that was so at that time, this was in 91, I think it was. But in the late 80s and early 90s, we had interactive computing for students, but it was on a mainframe. And so we'd have this one big, mainframe, and we had a couple hundred, user IDs for the students taking classes. They would all log into this mainframe. So at that time, there were three, I'll call them main Unix mainframes on campus. I worked in the computing center, which was the central IT for the university. Computer science had a mainframe of their own. And then electrical engineering, which then became computer engineering, they had a Unix mainframe of their own. So literally there were 6 of us on campus there, because each one of, we had 2 people working on each one. There were 6 of us on campus who knew anything about Unix. And so we formed our own little, support group. So, with that, and again, for the Unix diehards, because in that era, there were only 3 machines and there were 6 admins, we became our own little backups for each other. And so we gave each other our login connections using the R commands, right? So, you log into one machine, you were trusted to log into the other machines without presenting a password. That was a very common practice at that time. And so what happened was the computer science sysadmin, she discovered somebody, a user ID on her mainframe for a professor that she knew was on sabbatical and knew was not, using their account. And so she killed the account, and the account came back, and then she killed it again, and then another account came back, and then all of a sudden her machine started acting really funny. And again, the technology at that time, the main consoles were hard copy consoles. So, we used to feed it the fanfold paper and we would have a hard copy of what was going on. And that really is what kind of, broke it open for her, because she's looking at the logs and she sees that this particular user ID had logged in after she killed the other one and had SU'd to root. And then things started, host not, file not found, file not found. So that's how she knew that she was in trouble. Well, because we had this shared, arrangement with the R commands, the hacker, when he broke into her machine, he bounced over to my machine and hadn't done anything on my machine. And the way I discovered it was, I started looking, when she said something's going on over here, we, both of us on the EE side and on my side, we started looking at our logs, and I noticed that she had, her user ID had logged into my system like at 4 a.m. Now, like any good system, and the habits of your users. Well, she never comes in. She was not a night owl. She would log in at 8 a.m. At 12:01, she'd, log out to go to lunch. She'd come back at 1:05. At 4:45, she was gone, right? Never that thing. So I saw this login at 4 a.m. So I sent her a note and I said, "Hey, welcome to the Vampire Club," and she goes, "What are you talking about?" And I said, "I saw you logged into my machine. I guess you were trying to recover some of your files." And she goes, "Wasn't me." And that's what,
Yeah.
oh crap.
Yeah.
So it took us, so the hacker was pretty persistent. We'd rebuild systems and we'd see him banging on our doors again. And again, this was in the 1991. Alec Moffat had just come out with the password guessing program called Crack. And we found the program, out on the net, and we started running it against our user IDs. And of course, in that era, everybody's password was guessed, because we picked stupid passwords. So as we found, user IDs with this, 48 hours later, we would see all these login attempts to those user IDs with the old password. Because, and we're like, wait a minute, this guy's grabbing our password files, because you could do that in that era. Because the password file in Unix, right, it was read-only.
Right.
But it was before shadow passwords were invented, if you will.
Sure.
So the encrypted password string was inside the Etsy password file. And so what we realized was that what he did was he popped into our machines, copied the Etsy password file to his machine, and was running crack on it to get user IDs. And then he would come back in and log in with the right credentials.
Sure. Yeah.
It took us 2.5 months or so to clean it up, and finally, he went away. A lot of he was coming in through MIT at the time, had a server out on the net that they left wide open to people to be able to, you could log into that machine, and then from there you could log anywhere else to any other machines that were on the internet. And they did that as a service. They were pretty adamant at that time about not restricting it. But this kid, who it turns out was in Oregon, found that site and was using that machine to log into all these other, machines around the world. So it took us, like I said, 2 or 3 months to clean up the mess. And then we all decided, my backup, Ron Jarrell, he and I, we looked at each other. We said, we don't want to do this again. Let's see how he got in. And we started looking to see what type of computer security books were out there. And the only things we could find were all cryptography books and things like that. And then Cheswick and Bellevin came out with a firewall book. And we said, oh my God, this is kind of what we need. And then out of the blue, I got this email from this startup company called the SANS Institute. And in that era, SANS was, so nowadays, SANS calls them summits. They're like 2-day conferences with, 45-minute speeches. It's like everybody does a talk. Well, that's what SANS was like in that era, in the 90s. It was these 2-day conferences. People would do these talks. And they were doing it was an advertisement for a conference, a computer security conference, and they had featured speakers, and the featured speakers were the authors of the few books that we found. And and it was in Washington D.C., which is, I grew up in the D.C. area. It was 4.5-hour drive for us, to there. And I said, well, this is great. I'll let's go to this. And I went. I asked my boss, hey, I'd like to go to this conference. And he looked at it and said, can't go. We don't have the money. So
that sounds familiar.
Yeah, it sounds real familiar, right? So, God, but we really need to go. He said, sorry, we just don't have the money to send you. And I said, but, I got family there. You don't have to all. He said, don't have it. So, we're cleaning up. We're trying to figure out, how to keep this guy out. And then a week or two later, I get another email from SANS, and this time they're asking for to call for proposals. And they said that if your proposal for a talk gets accepted, they would waive the registration fee. So Ron and I, we looked at each other and we said, well, we don't know shit about computer security, but golly, and then Ron said, well, I guess we could talk about what happened to us.
Yeah.
And again, sometimes, I'd rather be lucky than good, and we were too dumb to realize that nobody talked about breaches back then. Because, if we talk about breaches, then the hackers are going to come back to us, which is the exact opposite of what would happen in that era. If we talked about a breach, the hackers would know that we knew how to find them, and they'd stay away from us, right? So we submitted this proposal. I still remember it. The title was called Anatomy of an Incident. And so we submitted it, and it got accepted. So I went to my boss. I said, "Hey, we're doing this talk. Oh well, you can't really, don't name names. I said, yeah, I got it. So we went up there, did the talk, and Alan Paller. It was a standing room only. Um, we said, this is what happened to us. I made a joke. I said, y'all are laughing at us now, but when I get to the root causes of what happened, you're going to be taking notes. And the audience laughs, and it said, yeah, it was, poor password selection. We weren't logging, blah, blah, blah. And people were taking notes. And so then after the talk, Alan Paller came up to us and he said, hey, that was a really, very good talk. And would you like to work on some projects with us? And he said, sure. We wanted to learn about computer security. Here's a guy that was offering us a chance to do it. So we jumped at it, and the rest is history. I wrote I did a bunch of talks, but I wrote the first half-day class. So at the time, I was doing some outside consulting with a big firm in New York. The guy had heard me do a talk for a tech users conference, and I had built a small 3-hour course on teaching auditors how to audit Unix systems. Again, auditors in that era, they were financial auditors, didn't know anything about technology.
Yeah.
And so I had done a talk at SANS, one of the SANS technical conferences, about that, and Alan came up to me and said, hey, I've got a bunch of auditors that are asking for this. Can you build a half-day course? I said, yeah, I can do that. And I did, and it was a full house. And then he said, can you make it a full-day course? Yeah. And then can you make it a 2-day course? And then this was towards 98, 99 when SANS was starting to build the 6-day courses, 401 and what became 401. And so they asked, if I could build a 6-day version of the course. And at the time I said, I just don't have the time to do 6 days, but I'll work with whoever. And Dave Holzer, who's a SANS fellow now, he joined SANS. And so he and we wrote the first what became the 507 course, the Intro to the Auditing course. And then, SANS at that time was, you had the sort of the instructional wing, the guys that were teaching the classes, and then you had sort of the research wing, and that was Alan's thing. Alan would say, we're getting a bunch of people together, and we want to see if we can come up with a way to categorize the attacks that we're seeing, and then once we got that list, then we want to figure out ways to defend against it, and the most common attacks, and that became the basis for the Center for Internet Security. That was a SANS spin-off project. U.S. Cyber Challenge, the thing I was mentioning there, that was a SANS spin-off project. He asked us here at Virginia Tech if I could put together a team to build a 2,000 question pool for C, C++, Perl at the time for the scripting language, and on how to write secure code in those languages. And we did, and that became, what he did was then he went out to software vendors and he said, your software developers don't know how to write secure code. And here's an exam. You have your guys take it. No strings attached. You can do whatever you want. And the average test scores were like in the 30s out of 100. So from that, they built the secure coding courses that SANS used to, teach. So I spent a lot of time on that research side of SANS, and it was, and everything that I learned there, I just brought back to tech.
Yeah.
And then one of the programs, I guess for me that I'm sort of most proud of was the SANS training thing, the program that we did for edus and for state and local governments, where, SANS basically gave everybody, if you were any edu, K through 12, community college or higher ed, state or local government, you got a 60% discount on the SANS classes. We hosted it on campus. We did it once a year, and we'd have 250, 300 students come to Tech to take a SANS class, and we were able to do that for 18 years. we had to stop again. COVID kind of blew it up. In fact, when they were just starting to shut down for COVID, that was the tail end of the last class that we were able to do on site. We did a couple afterwards that were, remote, but then we ran out of money to fund people at the university. But that program, I think, was really, really good because it got training out to people around the country that needed it. And everybody, I think it just sort of, raised the level for everybody else.
Yeah, I took advantage. I didn't go to the one on site, but I definitely took advantage of the discounted courses with SANS.
Yeah.
And it really was helpful, and my team did the same. Super helpful, right? Just very in depth, very professional. One thing you mentioned that I just circled was paper logs. So legit, you went back through paper, reams of paper. Matt, I'm trying to get this picture for people who are thinking about investigating incidents, and they're like, "Wait a minute, you went through paper to find
Hang on a minute.
bad activity?"
Yeah. Hang on. I'll be right. Let me pull this up.
Yeah. You got one, hopefully. Oh yeah. Oh man, there it is. The green and white ribbon paper. Very cool.
Bad
Yeah.
fold paper. This was, the line printers at the time.
Yep.
They would print out all this stuff, and yep, I still have this. I'm cleaning out my office since I'm getting ready to retire. And I found those. I was like, oh my God.
So imagine trying to, you guys probably weren't thinking about finding bad activity, but when you came across something weird, now you're having to flip through that fan fold paper to find, wait a minute, okay, this is weird. This is weird. Yeah.
Yep. And then, but later on, it became it was good incentive to start writing scripts because, we had the log files in electronic form, and then, it would print out on the main console. And then we just, started writing scripts to say, okay, let's filter this down. And then we printed out, what we filtered out.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, it'd be boxes of paper that would go through that whole thing. And, floppy drives, the whole 9 yards. It in that era in 91, it would take, CS had a really, heavyweight machine. They had a 1 gig drive that we thought, man, you could put all the knowledge of the world on 1 gig,
Yeah.
But it took them almost a day and a half to recover the system. When the hacker started deleting stuff, she had just literally finished a backup, but it was on 9-track tapes. And this is one of those things that we learned, even if we have up-to-date backups, we're going to be restricted by the data transfer rate of the backup media, right? So if we have a gig of data, but we only have something that can do, 3 megabytes an hour, do the math, right? And that taught us a lot about, making sure, network backups, they're great, but if you only have a DSL line, it's going to take you a while to get that data, restored to the machine. Win Schwartau wrote a great book, a little book called Time-Based Security. It's a kind of a small book, like about not that thick, but in there, one of the biggest things he talked about was he did it quantitatively. So he would say literally, take a stopwatch. How long does it take you to do something? Click. And so one of his little equations was this E equals D plus R. So E is the amount of time you're exposed, and that's equal to D, the amount of time it takes to detect the attack, plus R, the amount of time it takes to react to the attack. And so what he was suggesting as a scenario was, I'm the sysadmin, I'm sitting here at my desk, I've got my dashboard up, and I see a flash, bang, something detect. Well, how long did it take to detect that? Well, if it's an automated thing, maybe 250 milliseconds, right? And so in his example, he was talking about antivirus software. So let's say it takes 250 milliseconds to detect a virus, and then to quarantine it, let's say it takes another 250 milliseconds, right? So for half a second, you're exposed before you kill the attack. That's if the virus is known, the signature is known to the antivirus software, right? If the signature is not known, it's infinity, and you're exposed, forever. So I've always kind of used that as a measuring stick. It's for incident response. How long does it take us to detect something, and then how long does it take us to react? And in a simple way of doing it, as a Unix sysadmin or Windows sysadmin, we have configured our machines to not allow us to log into the root account on a Unix system remotely, right? You don't do that. You come in under your own account and you sudo, up, right? Well, if in 98 we had an attack that it was a Friday evening, and I got a call from the data center, always on a Friday, and I got a call from the data center, and they said, hey, looks like one of your servers is hacked. Okay, great. So I'm at home. I try to dial in. I can't dial in. My account's locked out. My regular account's locked out.
Yeah.
And I'm going, I haven't had enough beer that I'm blowing my password. But what did that do? That forced me to drive to the data center. That counts as our time.
Sure.
So, for me, it's a 20-minute drive to the data center. So that's 20 minutes that we add to the reaction time. And I got there, and now I can log in as root because I'm at the console. And that's where I see, I am getting hacked, right? And as I'm working on that machine, my backup sysadmin, she comes around the corner, and it's Friday evening, right? And we're looking at, what are you doing here? She said, well, I got a call that said one of our other servers got hit as well. And I said, well, it's Friday. Didn't you go home? She said, no, I tried to log in from home, but my account was locked out. So what they had done was they didn't care what our passwords were. They locked us out.
Just you couldn't respond.
So we couldn't respond. And so that added to the reaction time. So that's why I'm not a big fan of account lockouts, these days. But yeah, so, little things like that, we learned, and that E equals D plus R for me, that's just, and it's a way that I can actually frame it to my executive management and the board.
Yeah. No, I like it. I've not heard that or heard of that book, so I wrote it down. I'm gonna check it out. It it applies to everything. So yeah,
everything. And his scenarios like okay, the attack happens because I'm the sysadmin. I'm here at my desk. The attack happens that I'm at lunch. The attack happens that I'm at home. The attack happens that I'm at a conference. So and factoring in all those things, and then it's just a way to break it down.
Yeah, I mean, if you think about it. If most of the attacks, not most, but a lot of attacks happen overnight or when everybody's going home, then it's always adding that extra recovery time because who's on the keyboard?
Yeah, who's closest on the keyboard?
Yeah.
And now with AI agents, acting both as attackers and defenders, that time gets compressed even more.
Yep. Well, I was just thinking about, because you've been in security so long and you've seen just that evolution of attack and response. Like, what have you seen, like the folks that make the best incident responders, security professionals? Is there anything that traits wise that you would say, man, these things that I've seen kind of stand out of, I kind of use this analogy. It's not a legit analogy, but I always thought like a submarine radar operator would be an amazing incident response analysis because they're just watching, right? And they're looking for the weird things and the pings and things like that. Like, I've never met a submarine operator, but I would love to ask them what they do on the daily job, right? Those kind of like the things that I've also talked to others about, like, there's this investigative mindset that where when something happens, the people that do a good job of this, they have those reps, but really what they do a great job is they can sift through the noise that's out there and get to closer to the true signal in a quicker manner. And maybe that's just because of experience, but maybe there's something to it where they have that thought process that they can jump through what most people might get stuck in just the noise. I don't know. What do you think about that?
Oh no, I think you're dead on right with this one. I've always maintained that I'm looking for people who have an aptitude for things, and some of the advice. So I'll give you this an example. I had a student here. He was here before COVID. The kid wrote CTFs. He participated in CTFs, and he always would score in the top 5%. He taught himself Linux. He was a great Linux system manager. He was a Phi Beta Kappa. He was he's nationally ranked as a chess master. Got into cyber, worked in our lab, and did some really cool stuff. But he would not be able to get a job in the federal government, not because of any criminal thing that he did, but because his major was English. And the civil service people for cybersecurity jobs, they want people with computer engineering degrees and computer science degrees and nothing else. So that was one of those things that I just kind of went, this is a total waste. Now, he works for a pen test company now, and he's doing really well. He's, rising up the ranks. But what the aptitude thing is, he had that, he would just look at something and go, he was stubborn about it. He would just keep plugging at it and seeing something's odd here. Let me see if I can get down to the root of it. I was really lucky because one of my instructors when I was an undergrad here at Virginia Tech was a guy by the name of I.J. Good. And I.J. Good, quintessential British guy, mathematician, super smart. Much later, I found out, in the 70s, I actually did an independent study for him. But much later, I found out that he was one of the code breakers of Enigma, and he worked for Alan Turing.
Wow.
And I found that out because I was reading a book about it, Enigma, and they're talking about, Turing's team, and there's I.J. Good, So when I talked to him and I asked him and I said, and this is, in the 90s when before he died, and I said, you guys were first order mathematicians. There's no doubt about it. But you had thousands of people at Bletchley that worked on stuff. I said, what did you look for? And he told me, this actually showed up in the movie, The Imitation Game. But what he told me back then was, he said, we recruited crossword puzzle champions.
Yeah.
And I said, really? And he said, why? And he goes, number one, they don't let go of a problem. So they're very persistent with it. And number two, they have this ability to sort of, extrapolate some information from snippets of information, like 13 character word starts with AT, ends in ON. Oh, attenuation, that type of stuff. Yeah. And he said, that's what they were looking for in that thing. And I just, that stuck with me, in my career here. When I'm looking for students, some of my most talented students are not CS people. Yeah. In fact, they're very creative. They're musicians. They're English majors. They're business people, a wide variety, and so there are a lot more of those people than you would think. Everybody, they got to be special. No, there are a lot of people that like to do that, and so sometimes I would ask a question at an interview, and I'll just say, you guys play board games, or when you were a kid, or did you do puzzles? And if they, oh yeah, I like puzzles or stuff like that. Okay, to me that's a plus thing, because I can teach, I can teach them the basics of cybersecurity and the skill sets. Some people have a knack for race car driving. Some people have a knack for running. Some people have a knack for flying. If they got the will and the determination to learn it, then take advantage of it. But and my degrees are in CS and in computer engineering. But I'm like, that there are people out here that can do much they would be great at it.
Yeah, I agree. We had one student who was a psychology major, but was technical and could combine the two, and just
Mm-hmm.
was a great leader for some of our student teams doing competitions because he wasn't so overly technical. He could combine the two, right, and really help lead and speak the language and understand the technical, but also really move and help the team do what they were trying to do, which was always impressive. So
I
definitely.
call it geeks who can speak.
Yep, I love it. Yep, yep. So on the, I'm just thinking about your advice for those. We talked a little bit about mentioning this. Everything's shifting all the time, but it's always staying the same in some way. But is there any specific advice you would give, or different advice you'd give today for those that want to get into cybersecurity?
Um, oh yeah. I mean, number one, don't be afraid to make a mistake.
Mm.
I didn't become a cybersecurity expert because I'm a genius or anything like that. I became a cybersecurity expert because I got the crap hacked out of me in the early days. I mean, and what would happen though? It's like a self-fulfilling prophecy, right? I got hacked the first time. We spent a couple months trying to recover from it, and then 3 or 4 months later, someone else in the university gets hit with the exact same attack. And then we go over and go, oh, look over here, look over here, look over here. And they think, oh my God, these guys are geniuses. And we're going, man, I'm glad I wasn't the only one that got hit that way.
Yeah.
But but you use each experience as a learning thing, and so you build up that. So, and like I said, we're very fortunate. I know there's businesses that if you screw up, you're fired, and that tends to tighten people up. But you're going to make mistakes and learn from the mistakes. I touched a live wire one time when I was a kid, and my dad said, "Bet you'll never do that again."
That's right.
So that it's that fear of failure. I think that really I've seen in a lot of students, especially nowadays, it's they're so used to everybody doing stuff for them that said, well, did you do this? Well, no. Why not? Well, the answer is not in the back of the book. Well, no, the answer is not going to be in the back of the book. Tell me what you think.
Yeah.
So that's the first thing. The second thing I would say is embrace the technology. Now we're in transition points. When 30 years ago, when I was really fortunate to come in, when there weren't any standards, when there wasn't any things like that, and ironically, some of the standards that I see now in the federal government, and that I look at some of those words and I go, that's something that we wrote, with SANS, 30 years ago. But embrace the technology. I mean, AI, I've been playing with it in the last year. And, I started off using the agents, Claude and ChatGPT to write drafts of policies and standards that I had to create because I'm always terrible at writing a first draft, right? And then, now I'm branching off and I'm saying, okay, I'm writing this article. Here's the parameters. Rip it apart.
Mm-hmm.
If you were a reviewer, what are the bad parts? What are the good parts of it? And give me suggestions. So I'm starting to use the chatbots as something to help me improve something. And so, embrace the technology. The technology changes so much in our world. You've got to do that. And the other thing, so that's the second thing I would say. And the third thing I would say is get a life. I mean, don't just stand there and do stuff with computers and nothing else.
Yeah.
Cross-train. I'm a big fan of cross-training. And this comes from my volleyball coaching days. We had the athletes doing strength conditioning and all that. But in the summertime, we'd say, look, if you're going to play volleyball in the summertime, go ahead and do that. But play outdoors, play beach. You're going to use a whole different muscle set. You learn from little things. So like for me, people say I'm a good public speaker. I'm okay, I think. But where did I learn that? I learned that really from playing in the band. We were very fortunate in the band that I played in. We were together 38 years. We put out 9 albums, won a bunch of individual, independent versions of the Grammys, stuff like that. But we would play in front of 5 people, or we would play in front of 20,000 people. And we had to, we would tell stories, our shows where we tell a story about a song and all that. So I learned how to do public speaking, that way. Bring that skill back now to the technology side of the house. So if you have a hobby, whatever skill set you learned in that hobby, maybe being very meticulous about, putting together stuff like that. That's a skill set that you can apply to work. So, cross train, and it does not matter if you're a knitting or you're a mechanic or you're a carpenter or you're a coach. Coaching, I think that's one of the best skills to become a manager. I've think about it. When I was coaching in grad school, I was coaching at the Tech women's volleyball team, right? You got a bunch of elite athletes, all of them who've been starters. And now I got to pick 6 of them to be the starters. And how do I keep the others motivated, right? And how do I create training programs so that they improve? Well, those skill sets that I learned as coaching, I went to coaching clinics and I thought, I'm going to learn diagrams and all this stuff. That was a small part of the coaching clinic. A lot of the coaching clinic was how to deal with the athletes, how to motivate them, find out what their strengths are and their weaknesses are. Well, that's a skill set that has helped me to be, I hope, a good manager for my team. So, dare to suck. I mean, learn from your mistakes, and embrace the technology and cross train. That would be my three pieces of advice.
No, that's great. Yeah, and we didn't get to dive into the music part, but like you mentioned, you're a musician. You had on here that you guys wrote an original theme song for one of NPR's radio shows. Yeah, that's very cool. So check out.
Funny. I would get these royalty checks for $5.22, and I was like, well, that's nice, and it was always a code. They never said what it was for. It was always a code, and I never bothered looking up the code. And then I found out later on that it was the original theme song for the NPR program, World Cafe.
Very cool. Well, Randy, this has been great. Thank you for taking the time. And really, I mean, I love diving into the history. There's so much there that you have that I want to learn from. So just thanks so much for being here.
No problem. Thank you for having me. And this is a great thing that you're doing to talk to people like me and Ed and others.
Yeah, I think getting that word out there, and for people that may not know your story, and trying to spread it, I think is great. So thanks again, and with that, That's it. We'll see you.
All right. See you.